When it came to the 1980s, movies and TV shows gave people sometimes something special in the form of an exotic car or driver, or that of a sexy machine and body. For many growing up, it was the introduction to some wonderful attractions on screen that made them tune in along with the stunts and actions these films provided. MFP presents 10 car ladies of the 80s. An archetype to the other leading ladies in George Miller's films, the character simply given the name Warrior Woman, played by Australian model turned actress Virginia Hay, was shown to be hard as nails in a role in the follow-up to the 1979 classic Mad Max in Mad Max 2, or The Road Warrior as it is also known. Not playing the love interest or damsel in distress, Hay's character represents the hardship of this post-apocalyptic setting in this world shot in the outback town of Broken Hill in New South Wales, Australia, as seen in a cold demeanour and facial scar. Armed with crossbows and an arrow in the film, playing on a type of Amazonian style, as she would recreate this image for 1982's Playboy magazine after her popularity grew from the film, Hay would become a recognisable image in Australia in the 1980s, as she would go on to perform in a number of other films and commercials, along with playing a brief role in the 1987 Timothy Dalton introduction role as the new James Bond 007 in The Living Daylights. Although there were potential hints of a partnership between herself and Mel Gibson's Max Rokitansky, Warrior Woman's fate would lead her to be on the front line of defence on the big rig Mack truck R600, driven through the wasteland as a last-ditch effort of a fleeing group of survivors looking to make an escape from their pursuer in the form of the Lord Humongous and his band of marauders seeking to obtain the tanker and its precious cargo for themselves. Unfortunately, Hay's character would not survive the assault, despite putting up a fight on her way out as she is soon killed off early into the climactic chase. It had been said by director George Miller after seeing the footage and the limited yet obvious chemistry between Max and Warrior Woman that he had regretted killing off her character and would go on to write a new female lead in the same vein as her in 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. Yet it was thanks to Virginia Hay and her portrayal of the character of Warrior Woman who helped bring said character and others in the franchise to life.
Get rid of him.
Move it. Come on.
Out of my car!
When high fashion model Madeline Maddie Hayes, played by Sybil Shepherd, finds herself bankrupt after her accountant embezzled her liquid assets, she is left with only few interests outside of her home. That being a private investigation agency she owned as a tax write-off along with several other businesses, a wisecracking, smooth-talking PI partner, and a BMW 635 CSI. Created by Glenn Gould and Karen, Moonlighting ran from 1985 to 1989 as its comedy mystery action setting along with its sexual tension made it a hit on primetime television. The characters of Maddie and David, played by pre-Die Hard fame Bruce Willis, had shown great chemistry together on screen, as their tongue-in-cheek humour and fourth-wall-breaking banter had connected with audiences. After several years of playing smaller roles in Hollywood films that did not often give her favourable reviews among critics and even directors, model-turned-actress Sybil Shepherd had moved from the 1970s into the 80s by trying her hand at TV parts and was found to be the perfect choice for her character of the high-class model going from riches to rags tale as shown in Moonlighting. Solving crimes together, Maddie and David would often be seen driving around in a 1985 later 1988 model BMW 635 CSI inline 6 with a 3.5 litre engine with 215 brake horsepower in its European models, yet was lowered to 182 horsepower in the States. Although its use within the show was mostly limited to point A to point B transportation, a lot of the plot and story would be discussed and solved within the BMW, as its interior would become an almost stage set onto itself. The show's creators would occasionally involve the German luxury sports car in several high-speed chases and stunts, where Maddie would be seen taking on the role of driver when needed. The popularity of the show would be that which would go on to define Sybil Shepherd's career, as she brought her own style and charm and wit to the character, and wonderful comedic timing with a co-star. Eventually the BMW would become somewhat of a character itself, as it would not be spared any of the damage the show stars would give it, not least in a memorable scene, where in a fit of rage Bruce Willis's character is seen crashing the 635 into the walls of a parking garage, where it has been stated that the vehicle in use was in fact the 633 CSI that was obtained for only $1 from an insurance agency after the car was discovered with a dead body in the trunk, which left an odour that could not be removed, and as such made it a convenient purchase for the production and its needs.
Mom, will you read me a story before I go to bed?
Make sure it's perfect, okay? Better yet, take an hour.
Will you relax? I know what I'm doing.
When 1982's Night Ride had become a hit, the producers decided to change up some of its cast come season 2, if only for one character's replacement. With competition high to snag the top spot in the ratings war, NBC wanted to bring in a more attractive counterpart to David Hasselhoff's Michael Knight and his ride, The Night Industry's 2000. In came 25-year-old red-haired model-turned-actress-turned-singer Rebecca Holden as Flag's new chief technician April Curtis. Starting off modelling in the 1970s and becoming a Breck girl, Rebecca was able to grab attention due to her striking looks and wavy hair, and the transition into TV acting seemed like a fitting step for her career. Having had bit parts in other TV shows like Magnum PI and Police Squad, Rebecca had mostly been involved in smaller roles and not been a regular on primetime television up to that point. When the ratings of the new TV series Knight Rider had shown up, despite it being a hit off the bat, the show's producers were not fully convinced that actress and original kit technician Patricia McPherson playing Bonnie Barstow had the sex appeal the show needed to play among the small regular cast. In a move that many of the show's fans were not happy with, come the beginning of the second season, Holden had been brought in to replace Patricia. It would not be until season 3, where after many fans wrote and complained, was Patricia returned to the show, and her character absence was explained as it was said that she had left to further continue her studies. As brief as her appearance on the show was, the character of April had also gained attention, not least with her presence within the show's new intro, showing off some light midsection appeal. Having been the technician of the hugely popular talking car of Kit in the form of a black 1982 Pontiac Trans Am, along with bringing in her own charm, Rebecca had moved on in her career and went off to follow up on her singing and philanthropy, but is still appreciated for her contribution to Knight Rider, and she herself still makes appearances at conventions and other nostalgic events, as even to this day she looks back fondly on her time on the hit TV show, despite only appearing in one season.
Here's that explosive charge you asked for.
Oh, thanks.
After the success of Mad Max 2, the US and other international producers would follow up on this post-apocalyptic craze and either directly rip off the same concept or put their own spin on the idea of a dystopian future, as was a similar case in the 1987 sci-fi action drama Cherry 2000. Playing the lead role as wasteland tracker E. Johnson in this low-budget cult classic, actress Melanie Griffith would take on the role of the redhead no-nonsense character, who was hired to help track down a pleasure model to replace one that had been destroyed, which can only be found in the no man's land area of Zone 7 within the film. Bringing an obvious sex appeal to the character, Griffith plays the role straight even with his somewhat tongue-in-cheek film, as a character is seen to be fully armed and capable of handling herself along with driving around in a 1965 Ford Mustang with a 289 V8 with 225 brake horsepower and with its suspension raised and off-road wheels to better match the desert terrain. Set in the year 2017, production had begun in 1985 and had already fallen under some issue, as Star Griffith, who had become pregnant with the first child in pre-production, was under contract had she not given birth before production had started, was to be recast. When production had begun, she was just 3 weeks post-pregnancy and brought a baby on set with her to nurture, but was able to undertake the task needed. Yet after the film's completion, the production company had little to no faith in the film, as it stayed on the shelf for the next 2 years with only limited release. For a number of years, Griffith considered Cherry 2000 to be her least favourite film, but has since recognised that it does hold a spot in its cult following by people, and had warmed up to the idea of a follow-up, where she at one time recommended her then lesser-known daughter turned actress Dakota Johnson take on the role in a prequel movie, yet this idea had never come to pass. However, the original film itself and Melanie Griffith's role has become fondly remembered over the years, and still draws a new crowd over the concept of a sexy female tracker hired to find a replacement pleasure robot, where people would rather draw up contracts to have sex, or choose an android than do things the old-fashioned way.
Swallow my gum.
I can get anything I want. And right now I want a party.
A one-of-a-kind film with a story somewhat similarly touched upon before in the short-lived 1983 TV series Automan, Weird Science plays out where, thanks to the help of a computer and 1980s magic, a physical manifestation of an AI is created in the form of many young man's idea at the time what may have been the perfect woman, in American-born, London-raised model turned actress Kelly LeBrock. With home computers at the time still being relatively new, and a concept not fully understood by the masses of its capabilities, 80s teen film icon John Hughes came up with the idea and wrote a script in just 2 days of a story about 2 young men creating an artificial woman to meet their erotic desires and questions. Given their creation the name of Lisa, which was in the script inspired by the then Apple graphic user interface computer of the same name, Kelly LeBrock becomes a somewhat genie-type character who can create almost anything at will she chooses. With a first instinct to take her creators Gary and Wyatt, played by Anthony Michael Hall and Ilian Mitchell-Smith, out for a night on the town, Lisa manifests herself her first form of transport in the form of a 6th generation 1959 pink Cadillac Series 62 convertible with a 390 cubic inch V8 producing 325 to 345 horsepower. As the film progresses with comedy and teenage hijinks ensuing, Lisa would create 2 other vehicles for her Frankenstein-esque lovers, one being a 1984 Porsche 928S 4.7 litre V8 with around 300 horsepower and a top speed of 146 miles per hour, and the other a 1983 classic red Ferrari Mondale QV Cabriolet 3 litre V8 with 237 horsepower, shown in use in a modest quick car chase within the Chicago morning streets. Ironically, both cars are perhaps towards the least favourite models of Porsche and Ferrari among hardcore collectors respectively, yet at the time were very much becoming 80s icons themselves, especially the 928, thanks to frequent use in other films of that era. With mixed reviews at the time, Weird Science was still another success for Hughes, where although it might not always be on the top of many lists of favourite for fans of John Hughes movies, its fun premise and the idea of a character, where even Starla Brock described as Mary Poppins with breasts, who can create anything she wants, including an array of sporty and classic cars, struck the right chord with many young men in the 1980s, not to mention thanks to the bloody good looks of leading lady LeBrock herself.
What would you little maniacs like to do first?
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
Taking on the role of antagonist Auntie Entity in the 1985 third installment of Mad Max, Beyond Thunderdome, Tina Turner was more than happy to take on this role, which she quoted as one of the greatest experiences in her life. Having already been established as an R&B and soul music icon in the 1960s and 70s, it was the 1980s which saw Tina Turner's greatest comeback as a solo artist and a rock legend with many great hits early into the decade. Having only limited previous acting experiences under her belt before then, it was a surprise and treat for the singer to be offered the role to play the main villain in the then hugely popular Australian post-apocalyptic franchise, starring alongside the then rising Aussie star Mel Gibson. It was this chemistry that made her character stand out, as she proved to be more than an equal to Max's wandering anti-hero, not to mention her choice of hairstyle and the production giving her a one-of-a-kind costume the franchise had become known for, providing a chainmail dress said to weigh in excess of over 70 pounds. As per usual in the Mad Max franchise, a chase was to ensue at the film's climax, and Tina's character was to get a vehicle of her own to take part. Unlike the other entries, where the cars and rigs were almost always based on pre-existing modes of transport, the vehicles in Beyond Thunderdome consisted of custom and makeshift buggies. In the case of Arnie's chariot, a ground-up design was created which saw the combination of a turbine engine along with an unconfirmed sized combustion one. Able to seat 3 with the driver placed at the front, and wanting to be part of the action and chase which saw her behind the wheel, the only request Tina made was that a vehicle be converted to automatic, as the singer-turned-actress was unable to drive a manual transmission at the time. With the film and her performance well praised in the US, as Thunderdome proved more popular there and elsewhere in the world, unlike its native Australia, where the movie was not as loved as the first two, Tina's character had shown to be a great addition to the franchise, as her image alongside Mel Gibson was shown all over the posters and promotional material for the film, as she brought her own wonderful charm and style to the screen.
Goodbye, soldier.
As for the winning vehicle, well, we'll just have to wait and see. You haven't seen our equipment.
In 1981, US and other Western audiences were introduced on a more mainstream level an Italian sports car which changed history forever, and an opening to a film that would become just as memorable to movie motorcar enthusiasts. Following up on the successful combination of the Burt Reynolds and stuntman-turned-director Hal Needham pairing, the Cannonball Run, which was based on current driver-editor Brock Yates' illegal street race of the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash, was the third collaboration of the pair, after their hugely popular success of Smokey and the Bandit and the less-remembered Hooper. Opening the film with the introduction to a black 1979 Lamborghini Countach LP400S, as its V12 350 brake horsepower engine is heard blasting over our speakers right before the movie's main theme kicks in. What follows is a chase scene through the Nevada highways, though unfortunately obviously sped up in most places, showcase the fun that was to be had in this story. Within the movie we later discover that both driver and passenger are two women in brightly coloured spandex, which accentuates their curvy figure to the fullest degree. With actress Tara Buckman as Jill the passenger, and former John Carpenter spouse Adrienne Barbeau as Marcy the driver, the ladies within the Countach and race, where the idea of getting across the American landscape from East Coast to West Coast, were not afraid to use their sexuality in order to evade any police blockade that may have gotten in their way. These ladies were based on 1972 Cannonball Run participant Donna Mae Mims and the Right Bra racing team, who drove in the race wearing tight-fitting shirts, pants, and no bras. As for the Lamborghini's driver, actress Adrienne Barbeau had already gained attention for her roles in her then-at-the-time husband-director John Carpenter's films such as The Fog and Escape from New York, that was released that same year. However, she was aware of her presence in this film being mostly to showcase her physical gifts, having been quoted as saying, "All the talent I needed was in my breastbone." The picture proved a hit, making over $70 million worldwide on its $11 million budget, and it started a major interest in the Countach, and not least to the idea of two striking women behind the wheel, something that was brought back in for the 1984 sequel, this time with TV stars Susan Anton and Catherine Bach, replacing the original actresses as Jill and Marcy, who once again in the new Countach make an exciting entrance into the film.
Well, hello, Hot Pants. I don't suppose you have a driver's license tucked down in there somewhere, do you?
Ready?
Just say when.
Then let's go for it.
One of the most striking women on this list, Heather Thomas would be seen on the small screen starring alongside the $6 Million Man himself, Lee Majors, in the 1981 action TV series The Fall Guy, where Majors would play stuntman Colt Seavers, who would moonlight as a bounty hunter to make ends meet. It is in this setting do we the audience get to meet one of his prodigies and fellow stunt person Jody Banks, played by Thomas. Following up on the idea of adding obvious eye candy to their shows, the 1980s had left its mark on the imagination of a lot of teens and adults in that era, as the inclusion of ladies such as Heather had been influenced by other shows in the past, who had found success in including several young attractive newcomers into their cast to appease the ever-present interest of the selling of sex on our screens, big and small. However, Heather had proven to be a wonderful addition to the cast, as a character would often be seen putting her skills as a stunt performer to use within the story alongside Major's Colt. Although being the possession of Severs and his Fall Guy stunt group, Jody would be seen at times taking the helm when driving the other star of the show, a 1982 GMC K2500 pickup, which was equipped with a specially placed and modified 350 Chevy V8, seen performing a number of its own stunts within the show, jumping over cars and other obstacles alike. Having begun a career at an early age in acting, Thomas had become a rising star on the small screen, and her involvement in The Fall Guy, which ran for 5 seasons from 81 to 86, led her becoming the pin-up poster girl for many during that decade. However, her career had begun to take a turn, as with a lot of people in that era in the entertainment industry, she had turned to substance abuse and soon became addicted. She would eventually bounce back and turn her hand at writing, and would even go on to sell one of her movie scripts to Touchstone at Disney. Thomas later decided to leave the industry in the 90s, mostly due to stalkers becoming more increasing in her life when she was at the peak of her fame, to the point where one had been said to have even jumped over a fence with a knife in hand. Despite all she had gone through during that time in her life, Heather Thomas still looks back on her role in The Fall Guy with fondness, and although she acknowledges her character was mostly for the looks department, she still considers it a special time in her life where the show, though was not high in drama, was a wonderful experience in the driving and stunts she took on and those she had worked with.
Ta-da! About for the trip to Acapulco tomorrow.
Wow, this feels great.
Perhaps the ultimate dream image of any man in the 1980s was both the Ferrari GTS 308 and American model Christie Brinkley. What better way than to make it even more desirable than by combining the two in one of the most memorable moments in cinema history, in the 1983 Chevy Chase classic National Lampoon's Vacation. Simply given the character name of the girl in the Ferrari in the film's credits, the image of the 28-year-old blonde model Christie in a white dress behind the wheel of the red Ferrari was one that became engraved in many people's memories, as a character would randomly appear on the American highways, driving alongside Chevy Chase's character of a middle-aged father taking his family cross-country vacation from state to state. Accompanied by the song I'm So Excited by the Pointer Sisters upon the film's original release, Christie's scenes would later be changed for DVD and other international prints, and the song would be replaced to Little Boy Blue as she would drive up along Chevy in his Wagon Queen family truckster. Eventually, after some comedic car moments, both Christie and Chevy would finally catch up to one another towards the film's end. With no prior acting experience, the later scenes would prove to be a challenge for the young model, as she was her own biggest critic on set, yet her role of playing the sexist seductress got a number of heads turning, as she was more than suited for her part and then some. One of the issues on set was making sure and having model Brinkley know how to drive the Ferrari, which at the time, due to its extra gear, and that it was basically a street-legal racing car, required her being taught how to handle such a machine. The 1981 Ferrari GTSI 308, with its 5-gear manual, 3-litre V8 and 205 horsepower, much like Christie had become the go-to poster model on so many walls back in the 1980s, and was the perfect combination for such a woman in scene, with the top removed and her gorgeous blonde hair waving in the wind, and Chevy, much like every man in the audience at that moment, imagining sitting alongside Christie and in that car racing down the American highway. With a Californian license plate simply saying "Love Me," and that distinct sound of the Ferrari engine roaring, and that one-of-a-kind trademark smile speeding on down the road, an image that would make a welcome return to the 1997 follow-up Vegas Vacation, it was no surprise or wonder why Chevy Chase's Clark would give up all safety and reasoning to pursue Christie down, and giving us, the audience, such a memorable classic piece of cinema history.
Well, are you gonna go for it?
Okay, Susie, climb out.
And here I thought you two big handsome hunks were after me.
Possibly the quintessential 80s card lady, who had been on our screens for the longest part of that decade, Catherine Barker's Daisy Duke in her short shorts is an image most young men and women who grew up in that era think of when they look back on the late 70s and 80s TV action and car chases. One-third of the trio of cousins in the long-running TV series The Dukes of Hazzard, Catherine Barker was at a point in her career where she was less interested in acting, as not many options to play leading roles were being offered, and it was a welcome surprise when she was asked to audition for the role of Southern Belle Daisy in the upcoming series at the time. Becoming an instant attraction on the show, part of her massive appeal was a fun-loving charm and obvious sex appeal, not to mention a self-made clothing option in her shorts that would forever be remembered as the Daisy Dukes in her honor, that would eventually find their way on display at the Smithsonian. Being a show set in the American South, part of the fun of the series came in the form of the country backroad driving and stunts, along with the insane car jumps the show would become famous for. Although Catherine's character would be seen getting behind the wheel of the show's other star in the General Lee 1969 Dodge Charger, Daisy herself had a muscle car of her own in the form of a yellow and black, originally a 1973-74 Plymouth Roadrunner, which then had become a 1971 Plymouth Satellite in episodes that followed. Come the 14th episode of Season 2, Daisy would be gifted as a replacement to a destroyed Satellite at the hands of her cousins, a brand new 1979 Jeep CJ7 Golden Eagle, affectionately given the name Dixie. With a 304 cubic inch 5-litre AMC V8 producing 126 brake horsepower, the white Jeep would be Daisy's main form of transportation for the remainder of the series. Catherine Barker's Daisy Duke had become over the years one of the most recognisable ladies on our screens, and one heavily affiliated with cars in the decade of the 80s since then, as her contribution is still remembered even to this day, and for the amount of fun she had brought to her role and series over its 7 seasons and subsequent spin-offs.
You see anything wrong with what I'm doing?
Sure don't, Daisy.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like, subscribe and bell icon in order to help this channel grow and to bring you more content like this one, as your support is what keeps this channel going.